Fredrick hits send. By Sarah Marks. 21st Century Austen. A prequel story. I hate moving. In college, it had been easy with just a few random boxes and duffel bags of clothes to carry. It had been between different dorms and temporary apartments for the first few years. Everything had been furnished. Eventually, I was lucky to find a roommate who provided all the supplies I would ever need. Emma. After college, I shifted into annual moves and increasing items. Once upon a time, I was able to bribe my friends with pizza and beer if they carried up a couple of boxes. Now they all laughed and told me to stop being cheap and hire movers. I had hired the movers for this move, but Patrick and Vic helped with smaller items. After a few boxes, Pat ended up on a couch, a heating pad, and an ice pack in rotation after straining some muscle. At least the movers were in and out within an hour, and there was an elevator to make it easier to get up to the 5th floor. I left my friends in the apartment to relax while I got 2 pizzas, a case of beer, and a couple joints. The kitchen was completely unpacked when I returned, and boxes were broken down. Patrick was still on the couch but had managed to sit up, the heating pad still behind him, pulling items out of the boxes and handing them to Vic to put in the right place. "Good man," Patrick said when he saw what I had returned with and put his hand so I could insert a bottle of beer. "I found the muscle relaxers," Vic said from the floor as he opened another box. I knew that meant the bathroom had been unpacked and organized. That was the only way they could have found the small bottle of pain relievers that Patrick rattled as I put the food on the coffee table in the den. I imagined Patrick holding out his hands and grabbing at air until the bottle was in his hands. "I'm hungry, Fredrick," Patrick called, "bring me pizza." It wasn't long before we relaxed and unpacked. Patrick eventually slid to the ground as the muscle relaxers kicked in. "Babe," Vic said to Patrick when the first joint came out. "Should you?" Patrick shrugged as he put it in his mouth. Fredrick didn't feel guilty about helping his friend indulge. "What's this box?" Pat asked, pointing a foot toward the most beat-up box in a stack. My stomach clenched as I looked at the old, beat-up box that didn't match the mover's other pristine ones. "Chicago," I said, trying to give a casual shrug. In truth, it was everything left from Chicago and Emma. I didn't even remember what I had put in there nearly 8 years ago when I had moved home, rejected and depressed. Vic and Patrick exchanged a look but didn't press. "Do you need a rebound from Abby?" Vic asked, changing the topic as he took the top off another beer. Only these two were allowed to avoid the conversation about one ex-girlfriend by bringing up the latest ex. I didn't want to talk about either Abby or Emma, but Abby was easier to talk about if I had to pick. "No rebound," I said, picking up the plates and taking them into the kitchen. Being alone in the kitchen allowed me to take a deep breath and brace myself for the conversation. When I walked back into the den, I was ready to talk about Abby. Vic took a seat on the couch next to his husband and adjusted the heating pad. I sat down in a well-worn armchair. Abby had hated this chair, but it was something I had all my life, except for the years in Chicago. "We can set you up with someone," Patrick said as he fiddled with the heating pad settings. "Or you can do another charity date." I let out a bark of a laugh. "The charity date you had me do last month was a complete disaster. I don't think I need to repeat it or subject another fan to what I'm really like." The charity date plans had been made well before I had broken up with Abby. It had been a prominent national fundraiser, and I was surprised at how popular the date with me had been. The poor woman who won arrived days after Abby and I broke up. She had to spend the day at the studio while I worked and then took out for the worst dinner of my life. I knew better than to drink so much at dinner, but I was not listening to that voice. I got so drunk that I couldn't drive home and my first was kind enough to get me a ride. I sent her a very lovely apology gift. The next day, when I woke up with a nasty hangover, I decided to never subject another fan to something like that again. "She still thinks you're wonderful," Patrick said and laid his head on Vic's shoulder. "Well, at least one woman does," I said as he stretched his legs out and leaned back. "Abby doesn't hate you," Patrick said with a shrug. "She's trying to force your hand. She loves you and wants you to give in and move to New York." I gave a slight nod. I knew precisely what Abby was trying to do. Her career and family were in New York City. She wanted to be there, but I had told her many times before we started dating that I would never move to New York. Now I repeated what I had told Abby during our last fight. If I wouldn't move out there for Emma, why would I move out for her? So, Patrick said slowly, drawing out the word. That means Emma came up in those final fights. I scratched my head as I realized I hadn't shared these details with them yet. This had been building up for months. Abby told me she's selling the house, and I could either buy it or move out. That's not what I asked, Patrick said and fluidly sat up before leaning forward and putting his elbows on his knees. I raised an eyebrow. So much for the injured back. Oh, fuck off, Patrick said with a smirk when he realized I was onto him. You're avoiding the topic. Don't start keeping secrets from me after over 20 years of friendship. Fine, I said and leaned my head back. She wondered what my objection was to living in New York. Abby feels I'm refusing to grow up because I don't want to deal with opportunities on the East Coast. She's not wrong, Patrick said and dropped his head. What opportunities? Vic added as he adjusted his position. Patrick shrugged. I have no idea. This is Los Angeles. Television shows and movies all start here. She's not wrong that you're refusing to grow up. Would you have moved for Emma? Vic asked in a low voice. If she had asked, I mean? This was not the first time a partner had told me I was refusing to grow up because of Emma. Even my parents said it occasionally. I was often reminded that, at 30, most of my friends owned homes or were in committed relationships. Some even had children. I'm sure Emma's moved on and is practically running that publishing company, I said, lifting my head to meet Patrick's eyes. She's probably married, has a baby or two, and has her family doing exactly what she wants. Emma Shaw was a sticky subject between the two of us. I had told Patrick everything about how things ended with Emma. He maintained, to this day, that my mistake had been returning to Los Angeles brokenhearted and writing a movie that dragged Emma to make me feel better. It had been my fantasy version of the breakup, but it had been a surprise hit when released. I was sure nobody would know it was about Emma. Patrick, on the other hand, though I should have reached out to Emma as soon as I got home to tell her how much I missed her. He felt I could have done more to keep Emma in my life if I truly loved her. Have you ever looked her up? Patrick asked. I shook my head. I don't want to know. What's your plan then? Vic asked as he got up and helped Patrick to his feet. This was the sign that they were ready to go home. I wasn't sure if Vic's question was about Abby, Emma, or unpacking. Honestly, I had no plan for any of it. Every time I make a plan, it seems to blow up in my face. I often just react to the world. Maybe one easy way to grow up was to create some type of plan, but I should start with something simple. I got to my feet to let them out. I guess I'll start with unpacking and getting settled. With the bathroom and kitchen already unpacked, it was easy to finish the rest of the apartment that night. I put the television on in the background as I put books away on shelves and unpacked my clothes. I needed more furniture to make the apartment comfortable, but I wasn't worried about finding that. After a few hours, there was only one box left. It had been 8 years since I had taped it up and put it out of sight. Each time I moved, it came with me and always ended up on the top shelf of a closet. This time when I picked it up, the bottom fell out. The tape had cracked and stopped holding the box together. The pile of things fell out was topped off by a collection of personally burnt CDs. I knelt down to see these items for the first time in nearly a decade. The CDs were primarily mixes Emma and I had made for road trips. A few were backups from my computer, and others were bootlegs of live concerts I had attended. I didn't have a CD player to listen to anymore, but I took them into the den, trying to think of someone who did have one I could borrow. I got distracted looking at the CDs with Emma's decorative handwriting on them in different color Sharpies. I remembered the cup of multicolored Sharpies she kept at her desk in a repurposed free mug from some campus event. The bottom was dotted with various colors from uncapped markers as she wrote song titles on the CDs in small letters. Reading them brought us back to the moment each song had been important to us. I hadn't listened to most of them since I returned to Los Angeles. I wasn't sure if that was because I was avoiding them or my taste had changed. There was a pile of shirts at the bottom. Most were university shirts that we had purchased or been given. They were wrapped around picture frames. They had probably broken a few moments ago, so I opened them all, created a small glass pile, and cleaned it up before I looked at the last item. I shook the shirt out after pulling out the broken frames and glass scattered on the floor as I caught a whiff of Emma's perfume. I was avoiding it, but when I came back from tossing the shirts in my laundry and putting the pictures on my desk, it was the only thing sitting there. It was my manuscript, which I had written my senior year in high school and asked Emma to edit as a way to bond with her. The manuscript was in a plastic protective sleeve to keep it together. The elastic holding it close had snapped and crumbled when I picked it up. Inside was a USB drive and a printed version of the book with a massive binder clip keeping all the pages secure. I took it into my room and loaded up the flash drive as I flipped through the manuscript. The tracked comments were printed on the margins, and Emma's small script in red with more notes after discussing the book. It was easier to read the notes on the computer. I couldn't remember why I had printed it or why Emma had added more comments. I had never made the edits she had suggested. I stayed up late into the night reading through the manuscript. When I finally crashed, my final thought was to submit this book to be published. "You want to do what?" Patrick asked the following day at a cafe. I had called Patrick as soon as I woke up the following morning with a plan in mind. "I want to publish my book. I've made the edits, and I need your help finding an agent," I said and tapped the manuscript and flash drive. I had woken up and saved the changes I had made to the book, preserving the version Emma had created. I wasn't ready to delete that one yet, but I wasn't sure why. I had purchased a new protective sleeve to keep it all in and printed a copy of the new draft, which was bigger now. I wanted Patrick to read it and knew he would want to hold the book. "What makes you think I know agents who can do this?" Patrick said as he leaned back in the wooden chair and crossed one long leg over the other. I raised an eyebrow. "If you don't know them, you know someone who does." A wide smile spread across my friend's face. "What am I looking for?" I had made a list with my search criteria and passed it to him. "Primarily, I am an agent who had connections with one specific publisher and could sell a book written for middle school boys." Patrick looked down at the paper with a sharp inhale. "This is the company Emma works for, isn't it?" That idea had come to me as I woke up. I wanted Emma to want to edit this book, and then I wanted to refuse her. I was confident that this was the catharsis I needed. If I could make her feel rejected, we would have come full circle. I was confident that I could move on with my life and grow up. I couldn't tell Patrick all of this. He would hate my plan. "Emma is the best editor for this," I said, completely comfortable lying to him. Her profile on the publisher's webpage made clear that this was not the type of book she worked on. As soon as she saw the manuscript, I was confident that she would make an offer. "Find the right agent for this, Patrick," I said, leaning forward with my elbows on the table. "I need her to see it." "So?" Patrick asked a month later. We were back at the same cafe, but David, my book agent, was with us this time. David was slick with dark hair, gelled back, and wearing a fitted suit. He was projecting an image that didn't fit the man he was. When we first met, I thought he would be slick and manipulative. He was a gamer geek who wanted more young boys to love reading. "I did what you asked, man," he said and slumped. "They want the book but not the editor you're asking for." I scrunched my eyebrows together. "What?" David took a deep breath. "The editor you wanted, Emma," she passed on it without comment. "I heard from an editor I know well, and she knows this market and age group better than Emma. I suggest you work with her." I blinked rapidly. She had passed on it without commenting? I had made sure David sent the draft with Emma's edits on it so she would understand what I wanted. I had watched him attach it and hit send. This seemed wrong. I tried to focus on David again because he was still talking. A very strong offer for one book with a plan for a month-long book tour around the country. It would start at the big publishing conference in New York City where they want you to participate with signings and readings for other people in the industry, David said, not realizing I had zoned out for a few seconds. "Why would they offer that much for one book?" Patrick asked, his eyes narrowing. David chuckled. "They think there's room for a series," he said and turned to talk to me. "You haven't offered more than one book, but I think they're hoping to make you feel good so you'll want to write more and so that you'll continue to publish with them. But I want Emma to work on this book, not Christy," I said and crossed my arms over my chest. I felt like a toddler, but my entire fantasy relied on me rejecting Emma, not her rejecting me again. Fredrick, Patrick said as he rolled his eyes. She's not going to do it. Maybe you'll see her at that conference. David perked up. You would absolutely see Emma at PubCon if you accept this offer. I can assure you, no other publisher is going to offer this contract for only one book. This is a hot market, especially if your book will sell to parents and kids, but they like a series, so they keep the readers buying. I sat there and weighed my options. I didn't need the money, and I wasn't sure I wanted to write a series, but I was enticed by the chance to see Emma again and could re-strategize my plan. I need to think about it, I said. I appreciate that you're taking some time to talk with me, Christy said over the video feed. It was a few days since my conversation with David. I had asked for a chance to talk with Christy to see who I would be working with. The video feed wasn't great, so it was difficult to see what she looked like, but she was perky. Before I signed the contract, I wanted to get a better idea of the publicity for this book. Can you help me understand what you have in mind? I asked, trying to let her focus on what I was interested in knowing. It will take us a year to get this out. We want to launch it next June since kids and parents will be looking for books. You would go on a multi-city tour over the month doing signings and events. You would spend most of your time in Los Angeles and New York, but we also thought you could spend some time in Chicago since you went to college there, Christy rapidly rattled off. These are standard release activities for an author who will have name recognition. I nodded, thinking about my new plan. The tour wasn't what I cared about, other than what would happen in New York. The key to my new plan was for Emma to see me and know what it would be like to have me in her city. She would also see that she was wrong to pass on my book. That was a critical part of my new fantasy. She needed to know she had lost a book that would be popular. Why will I be in New York for a while? I asked, hoping she would take the bait. You'll be here for the PubCon conference where the book can be showcased. Librarians and booksellers are going to want to talk to you and grab copies to read. Plus, you're not hearing this officially, she said, looking on either side of the screen. This is an industry conference, but people who love books want to attend because we give away free books. The organizer is going to allow the general public in for one day, and you're famous beyond books. They think you'll be a draw. Who comes to the conference, other than the public day? I asked, not fully processing what she said about the public being included. I was too focused on Emma. Oh, everyone! Don't worry, I'll be with you. All the editors go because it's a chance for us to talk to new authors and support those getting promoted, she said. You'll come back to New York after the rest of the tour to visit any additional bookstores and events that we scheduled after PubCon. Will I see any of your colleagues during that visit? I asked, hoping for a more intimate opportunity to see Emma. Christy shrugged. Probably not, and you may not even see me that much. I wrapped up the conversation, learning everything I needed to know to make a decision. I'll let you know my decision, I said before ending it. If you accept, just hit send on the contract. Christy said as she waved. Once I shut the laptop, I turned to Patrick, who was sitting in my apartment office. Do you want to embarrass Emma? He asked, drumming his fingers on his leg while leaning back in a chair. I shrugged. Want her to see what she refused, twice. All right then, he said and got to his feet. What are you going to do? I'm going to accept the offer. David's right that it's better than I'd get from other publishers, and I'll very likely get to see Emma. No other publisher will get me that opportunity. Then sign the contract and hit send. My friend said and moved to the door. I watched as he went to the kitchen to grab the champagne. I quickly signed the contract, scanned it, and hit send. It felt good, and I was grinning when Patrick brought the glasses into the room. We clinked them together before taking a sip. I don't think I've seen you this happy in years, he said after we finished. I let my shoulders relax. I feel happier. Are you happy that you'll see Emma in a year or that your book is getting published? I thought about it for a moment. Both, but I'm only seeing Emma, so I can refuse her. Sure, tell yourself that you're only seeing the love of your life so you can show her how good your life is, Patrick said with a scoff. I rolled my eyes, but after he left, I kept playing his words repeatedly in my head. At the time, I was confident he was simply being snarky since I wasn't doing what he wanted. A year later, when I walked with Christy through the expo floor at PubCon, Patrick's words were back in my head. As my editor opened the door to the publisher's staging area, I was hit with the smell of Emma's perfume, and I knew I was wrong about why I had done this. Hitting send and publishing this book was the best decision I had made in years, but for reasons I was now ready to admit.